Hey everybody, and welcome to another video on making Power BI dashboards for team sports. Today we're going to be going through how to make a high metabolic load effort report that is going to reflect the match fitness of our players. So what we have here is all of our players' high intensity efforts information, which is going to be reflected as the average time of recovery and the total distance made by each effort. So what we have here is the information on how long our players need to repeat a high metabolic load effort and the distance covered during each part of the game. So you're going to be able to see how much time a player needs to recover between each action and how much distance my player is covering in each action throughout the whole game. So this is my entire 90 minutes of a game divided in 15-minute periods. So by the end of today, you're going to be learning how to make a dashboard like this one, which is going to finally allow you to view if my player is able to maintain the intensity of the match in the final minutes, and if there's a significant decrease comparing the first part of my match and the last half of my match. So for this specific example, I can see that my player starts off with very low average recovery time at the beginning of the first half. You can see it increase a lot at the end of the first half. Same with the distance. The distance is actually quite high at the beginning, so my player is covering a lot of distance in high intensity at the beginning in the first 15 minutes of the match, and that goes down at the end of the first half. And the pattern repeats itself in the second half. You can see the player starts fresh after the break in the middle of the game, and that fatigue is actually being reflected as an increase in recovery time and a decrease in distance covered in high intensity. So stay tuned to learn how to make this Power BI report. So what we have here is our activity graph from our GPS, right? So what I'm using right now is the STATSports Pro Series software, and this is the match data for one player. What I've done is I have divided each half, so this is obviously first half and second half. I divided each half into 3 equal parts, or 15-minute segments. This is something you can do automatically with the STATSports software with the segment drills option. Or if you're using a different software, you might have to do this manually. But in your case, feel free to use any time division or number of division of your segments as you wish. For my example, I've just divided each half in 3 parts, but you can do it in 10-minute periods or 5-minute periods, or whatever you think is more suitable for you. I'm just going to use 15-minute periods just to make it more simple and more easy to understand for this example. What we're going to do is we're going to export our high metabolic load efforts, and we're going to try and detect if this player is able to maintain the intensity of the efforts and the recovery time of the efforts throughout the whole 90 minutes of the match. So for this, we're going to use the HML efforts export of our STATSports GPS system. This is something that is only available with the STATSports software, and if you are currently a client of STATSports, get in touch with your account manager and he's going to explain to you how to get this HML efforts reports. But first, let's talk about what are HML efforts and why we're going to use it for this scenario. So what are high metabolic load efforts? HMLE is just a number of efforts that a player performs above 25.5 watts per kilogram. Most medium intensity movements are going to be quantified as an HMLE, so it's not necessarily a high intensity acceleration or a high intensity sprint that are going to be quantified here. It's just any medium intensity displacement made by the player. So a lot of you know that there's a lot of literature, recent research that evaluates the validity of using GPS to estimate metabolic power in sports. So you might be thinking, okay, why am I using a metabolic power metric to quantify fatigue? So should I be using HML effort to monitor fatigue in this case? My answer is yes. I think HMLE is a great indicator of any significant movement made by the player. They are sensitive to change of velocity and change of direction, and even though they might not be an actual representation of metabolic costs of the player, I think they're a good quantification of player displacements. So if you're not too concerned about the actual number of the energy expenditure made by the player, you can still use HMLE to quantify those player movements or those high intensity actions made by the player. So if you take up a graph, and in this case I'm highlighting the HML efforts of this segment of my activity graph, you can see how every time the player makes a significant displacement, could be even any acceleration, it's going to be quantified as a high metabolic load effort. So some of these might not be quantified as an acceleration because they don't meet the threshold requirements, but they are quantified as a high metabolic load effort. So that's why I think it's very good in this case, because it's offering me a quantified metric of every time a player makes a displacement. And also, one of the main reasons that I'm using high metabolic load efforts for this report is because STATSports provides me with this HML efforts specific export. So this is just the information about each one of the high metabolic load actions that my player has done and all my players have done in the game. So each one of these is the information of each action. So for each high metabolic load effort, it gives you the start and end time, the time since last. This is actually one of the key metrics we're going to use today. So this is the recovery time between each action. So this is it's expressed in seconds. So this is the seconds that happened since the last high metabolic load effort. And then you have the duration of the efforts in seconds as well, the distance covered, the max speed achieved, and the average metabolic power. And as we remember from before, we have divided our match data in 15-minute segments. So my first half is divided in 3 equal parts of 15 minutes, and so is the second half. And each one of those segments will be reflected here as a drill. So this will be first half fixed number drill number 1. And if I scroll down, I'll find the second segment drill of first half and the third one. And then onto my second half, part 1, 2, and 3, and so on. So not only have the information of each segment, but I also have the information of what part of my match it happened. So if it was the first period, the 4th, 5th, or 6th, so we can actually quantify all those. Or we can try and measure the differences between the high metabolic load efforts done in the first part, second, third part, and we're going to try and see if there's any significant difference between these. So now we're going to get our report from our match, and we're going to copy and paste that into a separate Excel file. So this blank Excel sheet is going to serve as our master database. So this is where we're going to copy and paste all of our reports are going to go in here. So for your next match, all you have to do is scroll down and you just copy and paste that at the bottom of the information, and then you'll be able to just filter it according to the date. One very important thing that we have to do before we move on is to fix a little issue that we have with the time since last. So as you can see, this is the recovery time between each effort. Obviously the first one is going to be 0 because it's the first one, and the others are just going to tell you the seconds between each high metabolic load effort. The problem is that when we scroll down and we go to our second half, the first efforts on my second half are going to show us there's been 15 minutes since the last high metabolic load effort, and that is obviously because you have the break in between the first and second half. So that's going to detect like the last effort happened at the end of the first half. So it's going to give you a lot of time in between. Now we have to get rid of this number because otherwise it's going to completely mess up our data, and it's going to increase the average of time between action by way too much. So we have to find a good way, a quick and easy way to get rid of all these numbers that we don't want. For that, what we'll do is we're going to highlight the G row, go to conditional formatting, and create a new rule. We're going to click on format only cells that contain, and under this box we're going to go cell value, select greater than, and we're going to go with 600 seconds, so that is 10 minutes. And we're going to format any cell that is greater than 600. We're going to fill it with bright red. So what this means is that I want Excel to highlight me that any cell value that is over 600, which is 10 minutes, to be highlighted. So this way I can easily just scroll down and that's just gonna show up as red on the cell values that it needs to be corrected. So all I have to do is go here and type in 0. This is just gonna take you a maximum 1 minute of your day, so it's not really that bad. Even if you don't want to conditional format the cell and you just want to look for it yourself, you can also do that. It's really easy. Honestly, it's not going to take you long. And then I'm just going to take the rule of this first cell so it doesn't show up like that. Clear rules from selected cells. And that's it. And since I was highlighted the whole D row, when I come down and I paste my next session under here, the rule is going to still be there. So you don't have to do that anymore. All you have to do is just have a quick look for any cells that are highlighted in red, and if you find them, just replace them with a 0. So we're good to go now. This is then the file we're going to save, and we're going to import this information onto our Power BI dashboard. So this is my Power BI dashboard that I've just created now. I've already imported the high metabolic load efforts database over here, and I've just put a title box on the top left. As my suggestion is that maybe you can put your team crest and the opposition team crest and the result of the match that you just played, just to give a bit more information on top. And this is just a dynamic image visualization that is going to change according to the player that I have selected. So I've already done another video on this, so make sure you check out that video on how to make a dynamic image visualization in Power BI that is going to change the image according to the player that you have selected. For my example, I only have 3 examples of players. This is obviously not real data. And now I'm going to just go ahead and create my Power BI dashboard. So the first thing that you want is to put a slicer that is going to have your date. So this is going to enable you to just select what date you want to see in your dashboard. So in my database, I'm going to be having all of my match data and all of my high metabolic load efforts reports are going to be pasted in the same database. So that's going to then be able to be filtered using my slicer panel with date. And next I'm going to put a few key performance indicators here in the top middle of my dashboard that is going to give me some brief and concise information about the match. So for that I'm going to use my card visualization, put it here in the top middle, and first I'm going to use my time since last. So this is the average time between each action. So I'm going to set that. Right now it's displaying me the sum, so as you know, Power BI is always going to display sum by default, so I'm going to change it to average. So this is the average time that my player spends between each action. So this is the average recovery time in seconds. I'm going to just change the label on that. So I take the category off and put my own title into that. So my average recovery time. Perfect. I'm going to just copy and paste that for my next one just to make it easier for me. And I'm going to change the information on this card so it shows my distance. So I wanted to show I'm actually going to leave that as a sum, so it shows me the total distance that my player covered in each one of those efforts. So instead of showing the average distance covered in each effort, I'm going to make it display the total distance that my player covered in high metabolic load efforts, which is basically just my high intensity distance or a high metabolic load distance. So I'm going to take the category off as well. I'm going to change the title to high metabolic load distance. And then I'm going to put one more card on top. That's going to show me the max speed. So my final piece of information is going to be the maximum of max speed. So I want to know what was the maximum speed that my player achieved throughout the whole session. So this is just a few key performance indicators that I think that provide you a bit of additional information in addition to the graph that we're going to make below just in a sec. So change the title as well. Perfect. So now onto the main information of our graph and the main purpose of this report, which is to establish what was the difference between the high metabolic load efforts carried on the beginning of the match, and I'm going to try and see if that looks stable across the whole session, the whole match, or I'm going to see if there's a difference that's going to indicate me a state of fatigue of the player or a lack of fitness. So for that, we're going to use my line and column chart. Make that nice and big over here. And our two variables that we're going to use are our drill, which is going to go on the share axis. And we're going to scroll down. I'm going to find the column value, and that's where we're going to put our time since last metric. And we're going to change that so it shows the average. So I wanted to show me the average recovery time that my player spent on each one of those segments. So right now the segments are not in chronological order, so I just have to go over here to my options icon, sort ascending, and sort by drill. So now you can see that it's first half, segment number 1, 2, and 3, and then onto my second half, 1, 2, and 3 as well. So that's just a timeline of my match here. And then finally, we're going to put our distance as our line value. I'm going to leave that as a sum. So what we have here is actually my average recovery time between each effort, and the distance is going to tell me the total distance that I've covered during each segment. And the reason for this is that if I would have just left my distance as average, that wouldn't correctly reflect the fitness state of my player, because my average distance might be quite high, but maybe my player only did a few high metabolic load efforts. So that might give you false information, that you might see, oh, my player actually did a lot of average distance in each effort, but he actually did very few efforts. That's not going to give you the correct information. So we want to leave that as total distance. So this is what accurately reflects my physical performance of the player on each one of those segments, because you have both the average time of recovery, so this is how much time he needs to recover in order to make the next effort, and this is the total distance. So this is going to be influenced both by the length of the effort and the amount of efforts. So that's where we're going to leave that as a sum. So for our next match, what we need to do is just copy and paste. So say this is another match report that I've made. I just need to copy and paste that HML efforts report and paste it at the bottom of my database. Save that file. Come back to our Power BI dashboard and hit refresh. So that's going to enable us to select what match we want to select, and that's going to even allow us to use two matches. So if we have two different selection of matches that we want to compare, you can even compare how my players' physical performance has been doing, not only in one game, but in several games. So obviously, one match information is not going to give you any decisive results, but you want to keep track of this on the long term. So if you even select similar matches with similar characteristics, say if you select only matches played at home and matches that I won by more than 2 goals difference, and you can even compare those matches with similar characteristics and see how the physical performance went without any external factors affecting that. So finally, I just want to quickly touch on some limitations and applications of this approach, and the main one being that a lot of external factors can affect the physical demands of a match and the physical intensity of a match. So things like winning or losing, being home and away, the tactical order of your team, the tactical order of the opposition team, the tournament you're playing at, and the weather. A lot of things can influence the physical output that my player performs in a game. So that's why it's important to monitor a lot of matches before you jump to a conclusion. So don't just draw conclusions from the information of one match. Make sure you monitor a lot of matches and you make comparisons between them. So make comparisons between matches that you're winning, between matches that you play home or away, matches against the same opposition, things like this that are going to give you a lot more insight on the player's fitness state. So that's it for today from me. Thanks a lot for watching the whole video. If you have any comments, any questions, or any new ideas for any future videos that you want to watch, please leave a comment below. And thanks a lot for watching. Cheers.